into a field with trees on the left, right, and center that opens into a large field. Put my hand down looking for my keys, can't find them. Frustrated and tired, I get out and go back and around the truck and open the tailgate. I grab 2 buckets and grunt and say shit while putting them on the ground and walk to the gate and start lifting the buckets over the gate. Grunt shit comes from the woods behind me on the next property over, also my property but never used. Property is nothing but dense forest that moves uphill and goes up onto a large hill. Kind worried, I listen closer, grunt shit this time sounding more like me. Very confused at this point, wondering what the hell is making that noise and why it sounds like me. Not loud enough to be heard over footsteps, so I ignore it. Over the next 4 weeks I keep hearing similar sounds and phrases coming from that area. Always carry a .45 and an fall in my backseat with full magazine, so feel pretty safe, but cautious. Sound keeps getting closer and closer every day of every week, but not fast enough that it's super noticeable. One night I pull up to the gate, this time with keys, and the cows who are used to my sounds and presence start to flood through the trees in a line. I step out of the truck and start pouring the feed into the concrete feeding troughs. I look up and the cows are staring at something. One cow bellows near where they are looking, after maybe a minute of all of them, and I staring at whatever is beyond the tree line. A sound that sounds exactly like the bellow the cow made, same tone, inflection, everything. Big difference though, much louder than the cows and deeper. Cows turns and bolt away from the sound, and I'm sitting there confused as. At this point I have my hand on my .45, and I'm very confused and scared. Whatever that was, it's nothing I've ever heard or experienced, and I can't imagine any animal that can do that. I slowly make my way around the back of the truck and onto the other side away from where the sound came from. Watching the tree line from where that sound came from. Slowly something comes into the light of the headlights, and I honestly am shaking right now as I type this. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't human. It looked human, but just wrong. Its legs were about the same length as its arms, and it walked on all fours. On all fours it stood maybe at 5 foot. It didn't notice me standing there watching it, and it started to sniff the ground like a dog. It moved about sniffing the ground, and it raised its head in the air and looked over towards the truck. My God, its eyes, they were bright yellow and very sunken into its head, and its mouth protruded inwards like a hole with skin wrapped on the inside. It flared out its jaws like when you move your jaw to have an underbite. It did this while sniffing the air, best way I can describe it. The ground was really slippery at the time from a week of rain, and I tried to. The sound of me falling made the thing turn towards me. It couldn't see me, but it was trying, straining its veiny and long neck towards me. I swear to God, it stood up. It fucking stood. This fucking thing stood up on its hind legs, and it was 5 foot on all four. Standing, it was probably 9 feet tall. I'm 6'1" and much taller than most people in my town that I know. This thing toward over me. Me, an athletic 230 pounds man, sat in the mud petrified by this creature standing maybe 30 yards at 9 feet tall. Was definitely a situation that I never imagined myself being in ever in my lifetime. I vault upwards with my legs and swing the door open and grab my fall and turn towards the thing. As I'm turning my sights to lay on it, I get a sight picture, and this thing is galloping towards me. I popped 5 shots off at the creature, and hunters know that sound that's made when you land on target. The thump of the round penetrating the target. I landed 3 shots, 2 in the chest and 1 in the neck. The creature made a gurgling sound similar to the cow bellow it made a few minutes earlier. It slid and fell on its side and writhed around on the ground in a circle. It got back up and stared at me. Those eyes were penetrating, and I laid 2 more round near its chest and head that scared it enough to turn and run back into the woods and to the field. I don't know why, but I had the strong urge to pursue it, and I jumped in the truck and followed it. I went down through the creek bed to go to the field, and when I broke through, and beamed my light to where the creature ran. I could see its trail leading away from the field. It took maybe a minute or 2 minutes to get through the creek bed, and by that time the creature had made it halfway across a 2.5 football-sized field. I'm still shaken by this, and the next day I came out early to search for blood, and the blood was dark black. I wish I had taken pictures to show you but I'm new, and only got into 4chan from YouTube green text stories. But yeah, that was my story. Nativo, or Natevo, were said to be a small tribe of small Bigfoot or Yeti-like hominid cryptid native to Sri Lanka. The Nativo was described as being even smaller than the diminutive Vedas, only between 3 and 4 in height, with the females being even shorter. They were covered in hair, which was often said to be reddish in color, and were said to have very short, powerful arms with short, long clawed hands. Unlike monkeys, they walked upright always, and had no tails. One The Nativo lived in small parties, and slept in caves, or among the branches of trees, in leaf nests of their own design. They had a varied diet, eating whatever raw game they could catch, including squirrels, small deer, tortoises, lizards, and sometimes even crocodiles. They did not use tools, instead disemboweling their prey with their long claws or hooked nails, allowing them to feed on the entrails. They were said to have a sort of language of their own, a sort of burbling, or birds twittering, which a handful of Vedas could understand. The Vedas themselves were the enemies of the Nativo, which had no defense against the Vedas' bows and arrows. It was said that, whenever a Nativo came across a sleeping Veda, it would disembowel them with its claws. The last of the Nativo were said to have been exterminated by the Vedas of Lanama during the late 18th century, when they were rounded up into a cave, the entrance of which was then blocked up with brushwood which was set alight, suffocating the trapped Nativo over 3 days. The cave's position was lost when the Vedas of Lanama themselves became extinct just a few generations later. Bernard Heuvelmans estimated that the genocide took place in around 1800, whilst Ivan Mackerl estimates 1775. For the story of the extermination was first reported by explorer Hugh Neville in 1887, who was told of it by a Sinhalese hunter, who was himself told by an elderly Lanama Veda, who himself had been told by a relative of his named Coralea. 5 Despite being a fourth-hand account, the story was confirmed in 1915, when Frederick Lewis was given the same information by several informants in Yuva and Punawapadu. According to an old Veda named Disamhami, the Nativo were exterminated no more than 5 generations earlier than his visit. Disamhami's grandfather had taken part in the genocide. Lewis made inquiries of other people in the village and in another village, and was given the same story. The first and so far only recorded sighting of the Nativo since the 18th century supposedly occurred in 1984, when one was allegedly seen by the Spanish anthropologist Salvador Martinez. He claimed that the Nativo he saw was human-like, with a coat of long hair with scabs, and emitted unintelligible sounds, before fleeing into the forest. It wasn't worth screen capping M8, I just gave a QR to get opinions from Anons. What it basically is, his friend works at this little old building on the edge of town, works there mainly by himself, because different companies rent it out from time to time to do work. One day the caretaker asked him to give him a hand in the cellar. Friend does. He's been in before lots of times, but he's never noticed a particular door in there before. Asks the caretaker what it is, and the caretaker tells him it's where he's going. He just needs friend to stay at the entrance with a torch. Friend does gets a bit curious and walks in a little way, shining the torch around. It's like a passageway, but he can't see the caretaker. Caretaker comes back and friend asks him what it actually is, tells him it's a sort of tunnel network that runs under the whole town. Friend tells me about it and asks if I want to go exploring it with him one night because he has a key. Then I found out the other day caretaker had gone in because they're blocking the tunnels off inside, and eventually the entrances, like working backwards. He said that workmen have been in, so he isn't sure how much is left, or even if the entrance is still accessible. I told my mother about it, and she mentioned her old school, that's about 2 miles away from where friend was. She believed to be one, but that was demolished about 20 years ago, and a car park built on top, so there's no way of getting in that way. I'm now sure that all or most of the old buildings that were built around the same sort of time, about 1880 to 1900, have access points in them, but most of them have been pulled down, and the ones still standing are privately owned and used. So basically the only way of getting in is from where friend works. Plan on getting some pics and things, if we can get in though. There's one that does tours in the city too, but I've never been to it. Those entrances are really well secured. By chance I was walking through a quiet part of the city by the river. It's a bit hard to describe, but the whole city is uphill, and the river is obviously at the foot of it, and it's a mishmash of abandoned buildings, really old buildings, demolished buildings, and brand new buildings. I stopped next to a wall and could feel a cold breeze coming through it, and noticed one of the bricks had been knocked out. I tried looking in, but it was far too dark. It was obviously a building or passage of some kind, and not just a wall the way I thought it was. I checked just now on Google Maps, and it has arches built in it, and, as you can see, someone has took it upon themselves to smash something of an entrance into it since I walked past. It might be bricked back up now, but it would have been pretty cool to go inside of, just to see what was there. The only downside is that this particular part is full of homeless people and junkies, so you would be almost guaranteed to run across one or both inside. Plus I'm not really sure how safe it is because it's just piles of earth on top of the roof part. I got a story, been meaning to post this one for a while. This is back around 2006. Early summer. I was just your typical 17-year-old kid. Parents moved around a lot back in those days. But we always ended up living beside large forests, woods or prairie places. Done plenty of exploring with and without friends. Ton of stories, but there's always one which makes you look back on with no definite answer in sight. No matter which way you look at it. But this is how it went down. Played a lot of video, and watched a lot of TV. Taps was big in these days. People respected them then. So you can see, I was really taken by the whole let's go ghost hunting trend. Near my house there's this big urban forest, kind of like New York Park. Split into 3 parts, Forest 1, 2, and 3. Through the years, I had a couple strange unexplained events happen to me in them. Phantom smells, lavender, roses, simply faded away as quick as they came. At night, in Forest 2, which had a concrete foundation, where probably a house once stood. Me and a few friends would see brief bright flashes of light just erupt over our heads with nothing ever there for miles, too close down for planes. It actually lit up the ground around us like if it were a hovering camera flash. Of course, now that I look back on it, it might have been a hunter's camera gadget strapped to a tree or something, one's guess. Then there was Forest number 3, which had a cemetery